I'm going to talk about digital media making, but I really do want to talk about how kind of the processes of participatory action and design research we've engaged in actually have been useful or not useful in the past year in ways we did not expect, as the government in Canada and also municipal government of Montreal have been moving more and more to online consultations about things like e-governance, but also for age-friendly city consultations, et cetera. So in a sense, the kinds of design work and the collaborations that were built with communities have ended up being not really what we expected. And I think I just want to try and make a connection between different kinds of methodologies and how they can inform each other in what I'm thinking of as in ways that are almost like they act as companions one to each other. And so I also just want to acknowledge that this is not work I do alone. I'm working with Kendra, Constance, and actually anybody who can join in at any moment. So what I have to say is, and how I say it is, it's coming from me, but it's really coming as a result of a team effort. I also just want to talk a little bit about Montreal, which is a very specific location and a very specific city. It has a primarily French population, but a very significant number of Anglophone, but also what they will say in Quebec they'll call allophone speakers. That also within the context of both Canada and in the context of other major cities in Canada, Montreal is, the position of being old and growing old in Montreal is really specific. And we know that more people in my city are renters. Why does this matter? Well, this summer we had an extraordinary heat wave. 94 people died. The majority of those people were older, single men, socially isolated. Why? If you're a renter in Montreal, the landlord will have the right to let you have and install an air conditioner in your window or not. And we have some of the lower, as we've seen climate change come in, we have some of the lowest rates of people having access to cool air than anywhere else in the country. So there's all these kinds of small ways that living and working and breathing in Montreal makes a difference. We also know that, in Montreal, women didn't have the same kind of access to education for a long time, and they were the last province to grant women the vote. So there's also major issues around literacy and education, all of which impacts and influences dealing with the populations of older adults that we deal with. As well, in the context of Canada, we're not just dealing with technologies, we're dealing with access to services. So I just want to raise the issue of money. And in the Canadian context, households whose reference person, that is the person who handles financial matters in the home, is typically from 40 to 54 and will spend up to on average, $257.75 per month on services. Whereas those aged 65 years of older spend at least $182 a month, not just on devices, but having a network connection, paying for what landline phones used to be $50 a month. Now when you're paying for cellular services or even bundled packages, and we're seeing more and more television, also we've made this transition to digital television. If you want to watch a particular program, like hockey, as many of us like to watch, you may have to subscribe to Rogers Sportsnet for yet another $175 a month. So there's been a whole change in the way that all of us deal with media consumption, but there's also really, really large differences in terms of the kind of ways that personal household finances and these larger questions of political economy intersect. And part of our challenge is to think, as C. Wright Mills said, how do kind of personal stories become public issues? How do these personal and political issues kind of merge and matter? So sometimes what they've calculated is up to 10% of your income, if you're an older person, will spend just being able to stay connected and to communicate. So we've been working with a lot of different, not just individuals, but developing long-term relationships to organizations and conducting action and participatory action research projects, particularly in contexts like in Montreal, where there's social housing for people 55 years and older where, you might be 55, but if you've been working in a factory or bundling groceries all your life, people will tell us they feel much older. And many of those people also have had histories of addictions as well that they're also contending with. So they're very difficult environments for people to live in because they're also being brought together, not because they have anything in common necessarily. Often they speak different languages or come from different kinds of backgrounds, but they find themselves in a situation of great precarity and not just physical fragility, but fragility in terms of the larger, in the social context. So we've been doing, trying to not think we give digital literacy workshops, but create projects, much like was being discussed earlier, where they tell us what they want to learn. Sometimes it's something as so-called banal as, what's Google Docs? How do Google Maps work? And sometimes what people will do then is bring a technology to a workshop, and then as they're telling you, I don't know how this works, a story comes out. My wife died. She knew all the passcodes. The barrier is as simple as that, and the moment is as poignant as that. And so, again, the learning we're getting is not just because we're teaching them, but what's happening as well is the students who become interns working in those contexts learn to understand and think about those kinds of realities of aging within these different environments, and not have pity, but have come to a different understanding. So again, what we're always trying to work with, as Virginia Eubanks wrote in her wonderful book, Digital Dead End, how do we understand anyone you work with in these contexts as coming to the workshop as kind of asset bearing in ways that you may not know what that asset is, and how can we also acknowledge and value what it is everyone brings literally to a table. So I want to say these workshops challenge our students' understanding of digital culture and of what they understand to be digital technologies, but also what they understand about aging. And we've tried to develop projects with both individuals and with organizations that are collaborative and co-designed and don't invent new technologies, but actually help people to use things that are off the shelf that they might have around so that they can repurpose them and learn to be creative with things that are relatively inexpensive. We also work with organizations like the Atwater Library, who have strong commitments to providing digital literacy in extraordinary ways and intergenerational opportunities, and we mutually support each other. So these are some of the things we've done. We've done podcasting, digital storytelling, blogging projects. We've done food blogs. We've also done workshops where we always combine some way of getting together. And we realize, in a sense, the digital technologies and devices really are, in some ways, kind of like a meta-media. They're not the media and the device themselves. There's something that can act as a kind of connector for other forms of communication to happen. And they can also act as a kind of barrier and divide at the same time. They're kind of these contradictory things. Again, digital music making has been extraordinarily important. Just to give you a sense of, to listen to something, last year, Emmanuel and Nora did a project in one of these HLMs with a group of people where it was very difficult. But we invited them again to engage in a digital storytelling project. And again, not everybody wants to tell those stories because, again, when you're working with people who've had lives really of trauma, they want to be involved, but they may not want to speak. So people may play the guitar, help choose the music. So again, the kinds of ways now that we talk in the design world or in the world we live in about, oh yes, we're going to collaborate and it's all very trendy. Well, that's another way of making it seem is that these are not, when you come to make something together, not everybody has the same interest, and everybody has something, again, that they bring. So some may bring the stories, some may bring the music, some may just want to hang out, which is fine. So I just want to share what's, again...
Good morning, everyone.
So now it's recording.
My name is Mary, and
A year in my life. Digital stories from the Dufour residence.
Now, Stan, it's your turn.
I'm listening to you.
Oh, jeez.
I used to come to Montreal every weekend to see my girlfriend by Greyhound bus from Long Island, New York. I'd finish work Friday morning. I'd be on the Greyhound for 12 hours here and 12 hours back to see her. And this went on for a year and a half until I got married. I was 15 years old. I was just turning 16 because she was 15. My story is going to start many years before June the 2nd, 1962, which was a great year for me. I was in love and I was getting married. And it was time to forget my past. And I was the happiest guy in the world. I had a friend of mine named Ronnie. He said he's going to babysit with his girlfriend. Do I want to come along? You know, as young kids, there's girls there, maybe we'll play spin the bottle or something. So I got there and I seen his girlfriend, Georgina Gale. And I looked at her and I couldn't believe it, how beautiful she was. And was so lucky that night is Ronnie had to go home early because he had something to do at home. So he asked me if I would stay with her. I say, would I stay with her? Of course I'll stay with her. And I stayed with her all night, and I wasn't allowed out past 8 o'clock at night. But I stayed with her till 11 o'clock at night. And I had to sleep on the balcony, the foster home where I was living. They wouldn't let me in the house because I got home too late. I didn't care. I was going to sleep on that balcony and see her again the next day. I mean, we got married. People were looking at us coming out of the church. They thought it was First Communion or Solemn Communion. They didn't believe we're getting married. We looked so young. We looked like two kids. We were. I know that today. We went on to have 3 beautiful sons. So I have a history, a long, long history. Myself personally, I worked in the bar business for many, many years. 37 years in the bar business. I remember what my wife told me when I was very young. She said, you work in a business where, let's face it, I met a lot of women in my life. She said, but I want to remind you, I am gold, and if you like silver, that's up to you. Never cheated on my wife, and I'm proud of that. Worked like a dog, I'm not proud of that. I should never have worked as much as I did. I managed to have a good life with my wife until she got ill. And I was happy to take care of her because she took care of me for close to 50 years. I took care of her for 3 years before she passed away. She had one special song that she loved, and I used to sing it to her. Well, today I'm so weary. Today I'm so blue, sad and broken-hearted, and it's all because of you. Life was so sweet, dear. Life was a song. Now you're gone and left me. Oh, where do I belong? And it's all for the love of a dear little Gale. All for the love that sets your heart in a whirl. I'm a man who'd give his life and the joys of this world. All for the love of one Gale. Good morning, everyone.
So each person had a 20-minute life story they carried away, and then we edited with them, or they did it down to 3 minutes. And we had a listening party within the residence, and people heard each other's stories, and then somebody brought out the guitar, and people started singing. And again, Stan was someone who didn't have a wide circle of friends and had never talked, and no one had never ever heard the story. But this kind of opened up people to know others thought, they'd known his wife better. And Stan had never really spoke of his feelings, but it was really interesting to see that kind of his participation in the workshop both changed the dynamics of the resident, but also created something that they could then carry away. So again, in that context, what we also heard was other stories. Stories of people coming to us and from their caregivers saying, why is this charge on my bill? What is this doing here? So, catapult to now. The Canadian Radio and Television Communications Commission. We participated in, we've been trying to get the stories of older adults that we've encountered along the way, often through these workshops and through working with different community organizations, within to the policy realm of communications policy in Canada. So it's not enough to say that we have digital devices or you have access to them. In my context, it's a really large question of how will you pay for that connectivity? Can you afford it? Are you paying too much? So what we submitted something in 2017, and then were contacted by a group of lawyers who are advocates who started to use some of the quotes we had gathered from people in these residences as part of our submission in 2017, where they said, you've pinpointed something we've noticed. There's a heck of a lot of what they would call misleading and aggressive sales practices that specifically target older populations and try to sell them services they do not desire, they do not want, or they cannot afford, or gets them into trouble and then they have bad credit ratings, et cetera, et cetera. So they had a mandated commission, as we do in Canada. We like commissions. And what they did was they had this commission online. So what did they do? They said, oh yes, we want to particularly hear from seniors, people with disabilities, and people whose first language is neither French nor English. What did they do? They put a survey online over the summer. It was in 2 languages at least, but that was it. You had to have Google or be on Twitter or even have a Facebook account to be able to participate. So they also said you could phone in, but we often test these things out when they say, oh yes, you can phone in, and we try and phone in, and then we find out you can keep phoning, but nobody will ever answer. So what became interesting is that seniors are part of what in policy studies they might call the not just implicit, so that should be not applied audience, I can't remember, the implicit and the actual implied, not applied audience. So another way we participated kind of making media with older adults, and I would like to gesture to Constance, is that again, we've developed relationships when consultations come up with many organizations and older people who want to participate. And so we call them up and we say things like, do you know this is going on? Have you gone online? But then we realized there was a real problem as well with the design of the survey. So we asked relatively tech-savvy seniors to test out the usability of the government survey online. Play. Played earlier.
I've been working on the computers for I would say, at least 10 years.
My name is Sadika. I am sitting here on this computer to see that if I can give my comments to CRTC inquiry.
Yeah. What?
To view the detail of the notice, to view the detail of the application reference, click on the link to
Convergence. Unless you really have graduate degrees, I don't think most people would know what a high school graduate would know what a convergence is.
call for comments on market capacity and the purposes of issuing a call for radio applications to serve Quebec deadline for submission of comments. But this, I am not going on the radio application. No, this has nothing to do with me. Change to procedure, revised deadline for submission of comment. Where would I go?
Let me see whether they are done something else. It's not intervention. It's objection. Support, definitely not. Comment, I think. Opposition?
Okay, let me see what I'm going to say.
First of all, I would object to number one, and then but now that I saw paragraph 10 in 1910 or 2010, whatever, forget it.
That took 40 minutes almost. Do you think most people would stick it out and take 40 minutes to fill out a form?
No, I would never do that. I am sitting here. I just wanted to, because we want to give our comments. And if it is taking this long, who will do that?
Should we go back to that form and see if we can finish it?
What for? This one? No. We would be here till tomorrow morning.
Shout out to Kendra as well for doing the interview. So, realizing there was a problem, we sent students to where people are, and we have decided that we need to think about methodology and outreach. So we need to go to the places where populations are, not expect people to come to us. We need to go to malls, we need to go to legions, we need to go to whatever their religious organizations are, and to other kinds of locations. And we need to have discussions. So we did over the summer, what we could do was interviews with 53 seniors over the age of 60 that were collected in tandem, what we hoped to be able to write the report we wanted to write to supplement what we knew that the data gathering practices of the government were with what we saw as an obviously flawed procedure. What we found was that 75% of our interviewees described reported misleading or abusive practices. But what I also want to say is that we used kind of the survey method and model that the government had devised. And when we just asked them to fill out the survey, we realized, and we have some of that data, the numbers were much lower. Around 30 to 40% talked about, this has happened, that happened. Nothing showed up, and that's in fact commensurate with what other organizations, but also the government data is. So the kind of quantitative methodologies that are being used to kind of document this, what we're contending, actually don't help to reveal some of the inequities and injustices that go on in relationship to those sales practices. And we wanted to know why. We realized, to link back to the digital storytelling, the import of those stories and the import of listening. So what did people tell us? Why do I need it? People go to sales shops in Montreal to get help, and what they find is that they're being talked into a device that they may not need. They're told the device they have is obsolete. They come back, they don't know how to use it. They may or may not have a network of friends or family to ask for assistance in learning how to use it. And they also may feel embarrassed or ashamed that they have bought something that doesn't suit their needs. And in fact, then again, we're placing an extra burden on care workers in that situation because they're the ones who then step in and end up helping then manage and mediate this relationship. People were intentionally lied to, and there's a lot of lost leaders out there where people are told they're going to get a technology or a device for free, but then what they don't realize is that they may not be able to use it for what they want, or things will show up on a bill where they were told that it was nothing, but they have no evidence or proof that they were told it wasn't going to cost them anything extra and they find out there is in fact a cost. There's emotional manipulation going on. People are being approached. One person told the story of being approached by someone at a kiosk who said that if you just sign this and there's no contractual obligation, that you'll be fine. It's not a contract. Then they found out that indeed there was a contractual obligation, that they had been manipulated into signing the contract. And although they got their money back, they still had to go through the steps of trying to secure that. And they just said, I've lost trust in the company. Another burden being placed on all consumers in Canada, but that are also being, I think, targeted to older adults, is a kind of mistrust, and also then the need for constant vigilance. You have to watch every bill. People are also choosing maybe not to get electronic bills, although there's a kind of forcing into the situation where people aren't wanting to send paper bills anymore, because then they feel that they can't, it's harder to get the money back if you've paid it out. People talked about pressure, and about the pressure of feeling like they were being taken advantage of, and in some cases an assumption about what you may or may not know about age, about the technology. But as Catherine can testify, there's so many different kinds of permutations of contracts that it's difficult for anyone to know what any of those contracts contain. And they're written in legalistic language that's really hard to understand, but as well, even the vendors don't necessarily know. And there's been some work done with mystery shopping too, especially telecommunications providers. And what they're finding is, in fact, it's consistently inconsistent. People talk about having to have protection. People talked about, in fact, going to a shop and other people helping them out when they were being sold something that was not what they were asking for, and someone knew they were going to get into trouble. They talked about the waste of their time and energy and whether it was being valued. And again, what we also know is that when you do have a problem with a telecommunications contract or a phone bill, that one of the strategies is to keep you online as long as possible so that you'll eventually hang up. We have a place commission for complaints. However, and what they found is there have been an increase in complaints even though most people don't even know that they exist. So it's telling that there's been a 73% of complaints against these industries, even if people aren't aware. So what we've come to think about is this kind of illusion of digital inclusion in our own culture, where things like online consultations and surveys do open up the possibility for participation, but in fact leave out large swaths of population and are often designed not to collect the kind of data that actually can reveal what we have come to think as a result of our relationship to working with seniors organizations in Montreal. They called it abuse. So when we titled our report, the CRTC called it misleading and aggressive practices, and we work with an organization called Respecting Elders, Communities Against Abuse. And they decided what we were describing was not just misleading practice, it was not just aggression, but was a situation of feeling bullied and abused. And what we wanted to say, because again, the telecommunications companies were telling us that it's a small amount of people, it's not a widespread practice, it's not systemic, even though 40% of people have reported this. What we were saying, along with our companion organizations, it doesn't have to be widespread. If it happens to one person, it's too much. In the same way, we don't say, I'm a really good person, but had a bit much to drink and I beat somebody up. Well, I beat somebody up, one person is still too much. So again, what we've learned through this is that the kind of other work we've done around participatory methods has led us to building relationships with trust with older adults who are then not only informing us by giving us stories from their lives or filling in the gaps with the kind of ways that telecommunication companies in my country don't deal with older adults, but they're also helping us to reframe in some ways things that we've noticed as ways that systemic abuse, I think, are occurring. That we've learned the importance of listening and the importance of adding also to the kind of data which carries lots of weight at these commissions, of learning to ask questions, and listening to response, really listening, which demands time, focus, attention, and an acknowledgement that that person is worthy of being heard, and that we have to practice the art of listening, which is a lost art, as Anne Basting said. We're dealing with the way that digital divides are being upheld and reinscribed, sometimes via mechanisms and processes and policies that purport to create situations of inclusion. We're being reminded that there will always be new technologies in everybody's future, and that today's so-called tech-savvy youth population, who are often the implied audience for media policies in my country, even when seniors are being addressed, will be tomorrow's old people. Thank you.